Right. Do you agree that there's bias in the ratings agencies' work that they've done?
I think once again, you set us up very effectively. The question of whether or not there is bias is exactly what you framed it to be, which is there any evidence that somehow Ghana is being treated unfairly or not? And also, it's important that we establish from the outset that because the government is taking this so seriously, it means that these ratings will impact the government's ability to deliver on its mandate, which is why we are also taking it seriously. If indeed, however, the government's attitude to it, which is that it's generally inaccurate and it's generally biased, is correct, then we don't have much to fear. If, on the other hand, it's not correct, then it will be important for the government to modify its posture. So that is why this analysis is so critical. I'll go through by taking you on the very thing that you raised. Is there any evidence that somehow Ghana has been treated particularly unfairly? And I think this starting phrase or this starting quote, it's very, it exemplifies the kind of analysis we need to make. If Ghana is spending nearly half the money it raises to pay back interest and principal repayments, and the average country that is rated in the B band uses 11%. That is ridiculous. It's really massive.
Yeah,
difference.
I mean that's actually shocking information.
Exactly. And so we said, okay, let's look at where we were before we were downgraded by Moody's. We were at B3, right? So what were the other countries in B3? And I just went around and I listed all of them. And when you look at the countries that are there, they include countries like Cape Verde. Why is Cape Verde in B3 now? Because 30% or so of its income is from tourism, and COVID has had a huge hit on tourism. This is clearly a country that can blame COVID for it, right? But when you look at across the table, it's not clear that COVID will particularly hit all these countries so hard that they all have to be at B3. So that's an important point. I'm making the point that some countries, because of the huge tourism component of their GDP, are particularly vulnerable to COVID because of tourism, right? So Cape Verde can make an argument that all the issues that it's facing is episodic. It's just because of COVID. I'm not sure that some of the other countries can't do the same. And Ghana is certainly one of the countries that was at B3 that was trying to do so. But the other point is the graph on your right. Have you seen the gap between Ghana and the other countries in terms of how much of its income it spends on paying debt?
That's very significant.
Good.
Very significant gap.
You go to the next one, which is the countries that are where we are now, because we've just been downgraded CA1, right? And when you look at the countries there too, you see clear evidence that here too, in a way, if you took our capacity to pay and the likelihood of repayment risk being the primary indicator, of course it's not, but if it was the primary indicator, it would be evident that even CA1 seems a bit too good for us, because look at the gap again between us and the next country on that list, Barbados. Now, if Ghana is suggesting that, somehow these measures don't correspond to the actual issues on the ground, we will have to account for why the countries that have been listed have been listed.
Yeah, and we are there with a country like Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
Goodness.
So what is it? Is it that the argument is that Iraq, for some reason, its COVID impact was particularly bad, and somehow its COVID adjustment is not being factored into the ratings? Because this is where we've been brought to, right? You look at the band, and what I look and what I see, I don't see any evidence that there is some primary driver of bias, that there's something about all of them which suggests a particular attitude. Certainly, they are not all African countries. We see a mixture of countries in the Middle East, Latin America, and the rest. Yes, most of them are middle income and not so wealthy countries. But yes, if you are not able to pay your debt, it's likely because you're not so wealthy. But it's a mix of countries from all over the world. The Pacific Islands, countries in Latin America, countries in North Africa, and countries in the Middle East and us. Secondly, also, there are not a lot of countries. That's another important point to bear in mind. We are talking of less than 10 countries in the whole world that are in CA1, right? So what is it about Ghana that will make them decide to pick up Ghana and dump us there? You have to ask yourself that. And then the fact of the matter is that even where in this club, we are still spending so much more of our national income paying debt. That's critical. Look at the countries that are worse than Ghana. And look at the mix also. Here too, you have countries in Asia, you have countries in Africa, countries in Latin America. It's a mix of countries that are not so wealthy. But that is to be expected. Because if you are very wealthy, then you have so much capacity. There are two reasons why the United States, for instance, no matter how much debt it borrows, it's never at risk of default. One of the reasons is that the dollar is a reserve currency. If you push it to the wall, it just prints dollar and pay your debt because it borrows in dollars. We don't issue dollars. So if we borrow in dollars, people are worried about whether or not we can pay for it. Most of these countries here have certain things about them that is worrying. And the fact that they reflect the ranking, the ratings, is important. So Ethiopia is in war. You have Mozambique that has defaulted. You have Sri Lanka that is, they have a mixture of complicated mismanagement, corruption, insecurity. And these are the countries that are worse than Ghana. And it's evident that they must be worse than Ghana. But even them, we are still spending so much more of our income paying debt compared to them.
Wow.
That's very fascinating.
But very indeed fascinating. Okay, yes, I think this... Okay.
I'm about to end. Give me just 2 minutes,
okay, sure.
And I'll end very soon. The other point is also that when we talk about analytical judgment, is the fact that Ethiopia and Ecuador, who are both either ranked with us or ranked below us, are growing faster than us. And yes, so that was not enough to offset their rating. It tells us something. It means that you need analytical adjustments sometimes. Because if Ethiopia has insecurity issues, it doesn't matter that it's growing rapidly. If Ecuador has serious problems with its fiscal governance structure, it doesn't matter that it's growing very fast. So this notion that we are growing fast enough or we have a big GDP is not enough. And that is another piece. These are pieces of evidence that we are not being unfairly treated. The other point is about currency risk. And here, when you look at some of the countries that are in our neighborhood, you'll find out that in the last half of last year, we started to degenerate in currency performance, which is also a major risk factor because our debt is issued in dollars. This is the most important point, and I promise I'll finish in a minute. That point is that increasingly, among all our peers, we have the most non-concessional debt in sub-Saharan Africa, outside South Africa, by which I mean that debt that is highly commercial and highly expensive. So if you look at this chart that I've just put up there, you will see that Burundi is actually the country with the highest debt per GDP, right? 175%. You see that the Gambia is in around 150%. Mauritania is around 125%. So Mr. Aklego is absolutely right when he says that our 80% is not that frightening. But here's why it's frightening. It's frightening because when you take Burundi's debts and you see the breakdown, you see that more than half the debt is owed to the World Bank, another chunk to Africa Development Bank, another chunk to bilateral partners like France, Germany, and the rest. Almost none of the debt is commercial. So the World Bank rate is so low, sometimes below 2%, sometimes zero. Same with IMF and the others. That it turns out that notwithstanding the fact that Burundi has like 175% debt, whatever, we still spend maybe 4 times more paying our debt than they do.
I see.
The perfect case study for it is Kenya, because another lower middle income country, a little bit bigger than us, but not that different from us. You see, therefore, that their ability to split their debt between commercial, you see commercial debt is only 30%. Look at Ghana's one on the right side of the graph.
Yeah.
And it started a long time ago. So what I mean in simple terms is that we have to start thinking about how do we get some concessional sources of financing that is not so expensive. And here, my point is not to make a case for the IMF, but to remind the government again that it's not all IMF products that come with concessionality. These are the 10 major IMF products. We always go and get EFF, ECF, because that is, we wait too late until our situation is desperate and we get a worst product. There are products like RFI and the rest where indeed you do not have conditionality. We should definitely be pushing for an RFI program. But if we keep waiting till we are late, then we're not going to get it. That is the point.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe and click the bell icon and get notified every time we share something interesting. We would love to have you on